Watcher, heed this record. Most believe Intune is tamed until they try to scale it across realms of laptops, phones, and kiosks, and the chronicles turn to noise. The enemy enters not through walls, but through drift, delay, and human habit. Here is the promise. Intune is the control plane. Azure is the engine. Together, they forge a self-healing workplace. Stay, and you will see how to bind managed identities, automation, and graph into a system that corrects itself before dawn. Why Intune alone doesn't scale. Traveler, across the archives of modern workplaces, the pattern is constant. Intune commands well, yet when left as the only steward, it is asked to govern more than policy. It is asked to remember, to reconcile, to repair, and to predict. That is where the records fray. The first wound is manual process. Admins export lists. They click through blades. They chase one device at a time. It feels fine at 100 endpoints. At 10,000, time becomes the attacker's ally. Mean time to remediate grows. Compliance becomes a moving target. Humans become the cue. The second wound is inconsistency. Policies ship with intent, but reality drifts. A device misses a check-in. A reboot is deferred. A script half applies. The result is two machines with the same assignment and two different states. One passes a compliance gate, the other limps past unnoticed. This is configuration drift. Without an external engine to reconcile, drift accumulates like silt in a canal. Here is what most miss. Intune is declarative at the edge, but not omniscient in the middle. It will tell devices what they should be. It will not scour the graveyard. It will not purge phantoms. It will not close loops at midnight without being told when, how, and under which sigil of identity to act. Thus enters Azure. The third wound is over-reliance on human operators. With each exception, a global admin is summoned. Keys grow too powerful. Access expands because urgency demands it. Then urgency becomes culture. The chronicles left by those who fell warn us. The breach often begins with a broad role, a shared secret, a one-off fix that never died. Least privilege is not decoration, it is law. The fourth wound is conditional access hell. Policies proliferate, names blur, a device flips compliant to non-compliant to unknown. Users see prompts that change with the weather. The admin cannot tell if failure is identity, device, or policy order. There is no single ledger that correlates the attempt, the evaluation, the device posture, and the remediation. Without a ledger, confusion reigns. The fifth wound lies in tasks scattered across tribes. Certificates live in one team, scripts in another, patch cadence in a third. None own the flow end to end. Therefore, renewals are late. Webhooks go nowhere. A device enrolls but never receives its full inheritance. The user blames Intune as if Intune controlled the river rather than the weirs along it. The sixth wound is cleanup deferred. Stale devices linger. Loaners return to the shelf, remain active. A laptop stolen 2 winters ago still claims compliant last month. These ghosts skew reports and mislead enforcement. Policies apply to corpses. Threat analytics inflate with shadows. The graveyard grows until the living cannot be counted. The seventh wound is patching without orchestration. Intune can assign rings, but business reality needs conditions. Only patch when Defender is healthy. Only reboot on a maintenance window derived from a calendar. Only escalate when a device ignores 3 summons. These are workflows, not assignments. Assignments alone cannot negotiate with time. The simple version is this. Intune is necessary, but it is not sufficient. What this actually means is that you must pair it with Azure's execution, automation runbooks for schedule and scale, functions for event-driven precision, managed identities for keyless authority, and log analytics for the chronicles. Then you connect them by the graph, the single tongue the estate understands. Everything clicked when the sages codified the roles. Intune remains the policy engine. Entra stands as identity authority. Managed identity becomes the authorized hand. Automation and functions become the muscles that move at dusk and dawn. Log analytics becomes the archive that remembers every judgment. Together, they close loops humans leave open. The counterintuitive part is this. Scale happens not with more hands, but with fewer keys. A runbook that disables devices after 60 days of silence does more for truth than a weekly export ever will. A function that validates certificates on enrollment prevents the late-night fire drill. A KQL query that shows drift variance by policy turns argument into evidence. Thus was written the first law. Do not ask Intune to remember, reconcile, and repair without Azure at its side. Intune declares, Azure enforces, the graph binds, managed identity limits, log analytics witnesses, and your realm moves from managed to self-healing. What happens when you combine Intune with Azure? Watcher, now see how the pieces interlock. Intune speaks the edicts, Azure carries them through the night. The graph is the shared language, managed identity is the seal on the courier's ring. Log analytics is the ledger that never forgets. When these stand together, drift loses ground, and time ceases to favor the attacker. First, Azure automation. Think of it as the town bell that never fails to ring. Scheduled jobs arrive on the hour, unblinking, indifferent to holidays or fatigue. One job walks the graveyard. It calls the graph to list devices unseen for 60 days, then marks them disabled or retires them by decree according to your law. Reports become honest. Compliance gates stop bowing to ghosts. Another job renews certificates before they expire, pulling from Key Vault where applicable, writing confirmations back to the ledger. A third validates policy posture. It samples devices assigned to a configuration, compares expected state to reported state, and triggers a repair action when variance exceeds the threshold. Where before a queue formed, now a bell rings and the town stirs. Automation also corrects nuance that raw assignment cannot. It can stagger enforcement across time zones. It can pause when defender is unwell. It can retry when a device awakens after long sleep. These are small mercies that keep fleets orderly. Intune remains the declarative source, but the runbooks close the loops. Thus was written the Edict of Nightly Reconciliation. Second, managed identities. The ancient keepers refused to pass secrets by hand. So should you. Assign a system-assigned managed identity to each runbook worker or function app. Grant it only the narrow graph permissions needed. Device, read. All for census. Device management configuration, read, all for policy validation, and the specific write scopes for the actions you truly intend. No stored keys, no recycled client secrets, no forgotten app registrations with broad reach. The identity lives with the workload, dies with the workload, and holds only the power carved into its role. This is drift-proof authority. Keys leak, roles endure. Thus was written the law of keyless hands. Third, Entra ID governance. Roles must be few and sharp. Device managers manage devices. Policy authors author policies. Break glass is sealed beneath time and reason through privileged identity management. Access is requested, justified, approved, and expires by default. Conditional access stands as a gate forged in ancient times, but now it reads device posture with clarity, compliant or not. Hybrid joined or joined, risk elevated or calm. Just-in-time privilege ensures that broad power does not linger to become culture. Zero trust is not a chant. It is a calendar and a checklist etched into roles. The chronicles left by those who fell and those who endured say the same. Remove standing power and the blast radius shrinks. Thus came the Edict of Least Privilege. Fourth, Azure functions. Where automation rings the bell at set hours, functions answer the knock on the door. A webhook arrives when a device enrolls. A lightweight function inspects the device properties, stamps a tag, places it into a dynamic group by rule, and posts a status record to log analytics. Another function watches for compliance state changes. When a device falls from grace, it triggers a repair script package via Intune assignment, or sets a temporary quarantine through conditional access by adding the device to a scoped group. Small code, sharp purpose, instant response. This is how events receive answers faster than a human can read the notification. Now weave them together. Intune tells devices what to be. Azure makes sure they stay that way. The graph is the road between them, paved and patrolled. Log analytics gathers every footprint. The query sent, the device found, the action taken, the result returned. KQL becomes the tongue of insight. Show me drift variance by policy. Show me mean time to remediate by device class. Show me the cleanup rate over 30 days. You do not argue from memory, you argue from the ledger. Consider the flow of a single enrollment. A device signs its first oath. An event fires. A function inspects, classifies, and signals its group. Intune assignments cascade, baseline, defender, hardening, apps. Meanwhile, an automation job schedules a certificate validation within the first hour. If the device misses a check-in, the job defers, then retrieves. If 3 summons fail, the job marks the record for review, posts telemetry, and by law does not grant access. No drama, no tickets, just doctrine. Consider repair. A configuration baseline expects BitLocker, Defender healthy, firewall on. KQL reveals variance on a subset. Automation triggers a remediation package, waits for confirmation, then requeries. Devices that heal return to the fold. Those that refuse are added to a restricted group that conditional access enforces. The user's experience becomes predictable. Fix arrives, grace period exists, gates close if grace is ignored. Mercy first, judgment then, law throughout. Consider the graveyard. Each night the bell rings. The runbook summons graph. List devices unseen for 60 days. Exclude break glass and service hardware by tag. Disable the rest. Notify custodians. Record the act and the reason. In the morning, the report shows fewer phantoms, clearer metrics, truer compliance. Nobody exported anything. Nobody begged a global admin. The system kept its own house. The simple version is this: you remove luck. You replace memory with schedule. You replace secrets with identity. You replace hunches with queries. And you replace apology with architecture. The realm grows quieter. The attackers hear fewer footsteps. The citizens notice nothing. That is the mark of a self-healing workplace. Real enterprise scenarios. Watcher, let us open the ledgers and read how the work is done when doctrine meets daylight. 3 chronicles, 3 wounds closed, numbers carved into stone so that doubt finds no purchase. Scenario 1. The graveyard problem. In a realm with 20,000 endpoints, the stewards suspected phantoms. The reports swelled beyond the living headcount. Compliance rates looked brave, yet tickets spoke otherwise. Thus, they forged a nightly runbook under a system-assigned managed identity, given only the narrow sigils: device, read, all to census directory, read, all to resolve ownership and device, read-write all to change state. At midnight, the bell rang. The runbook spoke in graph: fetch devices unseen for 60 days, exclude those bearing loaner, lab, and break glass tags, compare last login date time, last sync date time, and compliance state, mark candidates disabled, notify custodians, post to log analytics with a reason code. The first dawn cut deep. Cleanup rate rose from 0 to 9% in week 1. By the 30th night, the graveyard shrank by 42%. Conditional access gates stopped greeting corpses. Drift metrics stabilized. Mean time to remediate misassigned policies fell because every phantom compliant ceased to poison the ledger. The sages added a grace clause. If a disabled device awakens within 7 days and a custodian approves through a simple approval function, the record restores. Mercy was codified. Evidence replaced argument. Thus the graveyard yielded to law. Scenario 2. Zero-touch onboarding. In a federated estate, onboarding had become a pilgrimage of tickets. Accounts were created in Entra. Devices arrived from the vendor. Weeks passed before a user knew their machine. They drew a new plan. When a device first swore the oath, autopilot or enrollment, the device enrolled event struck a function. Its identity carried only device management configuration. Read, all, group, read-write, all on a narrow scope, and device. Read.all. It inspected hardware hash, manufacturer, and purchase channel. It stamped tags. Region EMEA. Role, finance. Security baseline, level 2. It posted a record to log analytics. Dynamic groups listened to those tags and pulled the device into policy sets: baseline, defender, BitLocker, hardening, office, line of business apps. An automation job followed like a scribe. Within the first hour, it queried certificate presence, pushed remediation if missing, and wrote success to the ledger. Another job watched for 3 missed check-ins. If found, it paused high-risk app assignments and notified the custodian with a restore link. On the 7th day, the council measured time. Median onboarding time fell from 9 business days to 90 minutes. Service desk tickets dropped by 61% for new device not ready. The users called it just there. The keepers called it the edict of invisible provisioning. Intune told devices what to be. Azure made sure they became it and stayed. Scenario 3. Automated security hardening. The enemy entered not through walls, but through drift. A baseline demanded BitLocker, Defender healthy, firewall on, attack surface reduction enabled. Quarterly audits revealed variance. The sages refused to accept ritual reports. They inked a KQL measure in log analytics. Variance by policy and device class. Drift trend by week, and mean time to remediate from detection to healthy. The chart accused specific cohorts: kiosk builds in transit networks, executive laptops traveling across realms. They answered with 2 instruments. First, an automation runbook that sampled non-compliant devices nightly and triggered Intune remediation packages, PowerShell scripts with idempotent checks, only when variance persisted for 24 hours. Second, a function listening to compliance change events. When a device fell from grace, it added the machine to a quarantine devices group. Conditional access, standing as a gate, denied risky apps while allowing a repair path to remain. Upon healing, the function removed the device from quarantine and posted the cycle to the ledger. Numbers replaced fear. Mean time to remediate fell from 3 days to 45 minutes for most classes. Executives, notoriously delayed by travel, saw MTTR fall to 2 hours because remediation ran when the device awoke, not when a human noticed. Drift variance shrank by 60% across 90 days. Defender policy non-compliance alerts dropped sharply, not by silence, but by correction. The citizens felt only a brief pause when gates narrowed. The fix arrived without a summon. The gate widened. There was order without noise. Mark this refrain: what used to demand 3 teams and a monthly checklist now happens in 30 seconds. Not by magic, by roles that fit the hand, by identities that cannot leak, by schedules that do not forget, by events that wake code instead of people, by a ledger that converts suspicion into trend lines and trend lines into proof. In every scenario, the pattern is the same. The graph speaks one language to all corners. Managed identities hold narrow power. Automation rings the bell at set hours. Functions answer the knock. Intune declares, Entra judges, conditional access enforces, log analytics remembers. And the keepers finally stop counting ghosts. Architecture breakdown. Watcher, let us draw the map in plain lines, so even in storm the path remains. Intune is the policy engine. It declares edicts, configurations, applications, compliance demands. It speaks once, clearly, to every device class. It does not chase. It does not bargain. It sets the shape of the realm. Entra is the identity authority. It holds the true names. It proves who the user is, what the device is, and which gates open. It binds conditional access to posture and risk. It measures trust each time, not once. Thus, identity is not a key on a ring. It is a verdict at the gate. Managed identity is the secure automation agent. It is the hand that acts without carrying secrets. System assigned to a runbook or a function, it inherits only the roles the keepers grant. It cannot be copied. It cannot be fished. It ends when the workload ends. Power is narrow. Auditing is clear. This is the shape of safe motion. Azure Automation and Azure Functions are the execution layer. Automation is the clock. It rings on schedule and performs durable, long-running tasks. Graveyard sweeps, certificate cycles, posture reconciliations. Functions are the nerves. They fire when an event touches the skin. A device enrolls, a compliance state shifts. a webhook arrives. Together, they turn time and signal into action without summoning humans at odd hours. Microsoft Graph is the unified device control. It is the single tongue across estates, devices, users, groups, policies. Every inventory, every change, every enforcement flows through this road. Thus, your tools do not scrape in the dark. They petition the authority directly, with scopes carved to purpose. Log analytics is the observability ledger. It records the summons, the queries, the matches, the failures, the fixes. Through KQL, the sages ask, where is drift, what healed, what resisted, who approved, how long it took. It is not a dashboard for decoration. It is the memory that turns rumor into trend and trend into proof. Tie them in sequence. A device seeks entrance. Entra judges the oath. Intune assigns the edicts that define the citizen. Automation schedules the early checks that catch missing certs, unhealthy defender, or deferred reboots. Functions respond to the first misstep within seconds, adding a device to a quarantine group or tagging it for the right dynamic cohort. Managed identity authorizes each motion with the least power required. Graph carries the requests. Log analytics writes the tale. Why does this simplicity matter? Because resilience is not a heroic act. It is a system that heals faster than it breaks. When Intune declares but Azure enforces, your posture stops depending on memory. When Entra grants just-in-time privilege, your blast radius shrinks to a measurable circle. When managed identities replace secrets, your keys cease to be loot. When Graph is the only road, your tools cease to contradict each other. When Log Analytics remembers, your team stops arguing and starts improving. The goal is not management. The goal is recovery without panic. A user moves across realms. The gate reads posture. Access narrows, remediation runs, and then widens. A device sleeps past a patch. The clock rings again. The fix lands when it wakes. A phantom lingers. The sweep disables it, records the act, and offers grace if truth returns. This is quiet governance. Mark the simple version. Intune declares. Entra judges. Managed identity acts. Automation and functions move. Graph binds. Log analytics witnesses. The system is not loud. It is inevitable. Common mistakes that break scaling. Here is what most ruin with their own hands, traveler. 5 errors, each avoidable, each costly when multiplied by thousands. First, overusing global admins. The enemy entered not through force, but through convenience. A standing global admin is a torch in dry fields. It lights quickly and it spreads. Replace standing power with privileged identity management. Grant the narrow roles. Cloud device administrator for cleanup. Intune, role-based access for policy authors, security reader for observers. Require justification, set expirations, record approvals in the ledger. Punchline, white keys become culture, culture becomes breach. Second, Intune without automation. They declare policies and wait for miracles. Drift gathers. Certificates expire at midnight. Ghosts swell in the census. Schedule the mundane. A nightly graveyard sweep. A weekly certificate inventory. A daily posture reconciliation for critical baselines. Let automation do boring work on time, every time. Punchline. If a bell does not ring, a human becomes the bell, then forgets to ring. Third, leaving stale devices forever. Reports lie. Compliance rates flatter. Conditional access greets corpses. Implement a 60-day auto-disable runbook with exclusions for special tags and a reversible grace window. Notify custodians, log every action, and require approval to restore after 7 days. Punchline, a census that includes ghosts is not a census, it is folklore. Fourth, using scripts with secrets. A zip of PowerShell and a plain text client secret is a curse that passes hand to hand. Replace every secret with a managed identity. If an application identity is required, bind it to Key Vault with role-based access and rotation. Never bake credentials into code. Punchline. Secrets and scripts become relics. Relics become leaks. Leaks become headlines. Fifth, letting apps drift across devices. Policy says one thing. Endpoints do another. Versions diverge, registries vary, optional features linger like weeds. Define desired state in assignments and verify it with KQL against inventory and compliance signals. When variance persists, remediate with idempotent scripts and measure MTTR. Punchline: what you do not measure, you will debate. What you debate, you rarely fix. A few lesser traps deserve mention. Conditional access. Hell. Too many policies, unclear names, and no correlation to device posture. Establish a naming edict, map policies to scenarios, and use the sign-in logs with device state to trace outcomes. Configuration. Pile on. Overlapping baselines and templates that fight. Move to a harmonized settings catalog with a single owner per category, one voice per setting. Ticket-driven onboarding, every device as an exception. Encode the ritual into events and dynamic groups. Let functions and automation carry the scroll. Return to first principles when doubt rises. Least privilege by default with time limits. Automation for schedules, functions for events, graph as the only road, never side channels. Log everything, query everything, publish metrics that matter. Cleanup rate, drift variance, mean time to remediate, reduction in global admin minutes, onboarding time. When numbers improve, the noise fades. When noise fades, attackers lose their cloaks. The realm that scales is not the realm that works harder. It is the realm that removes places for error to live. Thus was written the Edict of Quiet Systems: fewer keys, fewer clicks, more clocks, more ledgers. How to start. Minimal working setup. Watcher, begin with one quiet motion. Create a function app or automation account. Bind a system-assigned managed identity. Grant only these graph roles: device, read, all to see, directory, read, all to resolve, device, read, write, all to act, nothing more. Next, teach the hand to speak. Use Microsoft Graph with keyless oath. In automation, import the Graph PowerShell SDK. In functions, use MSL or Managed Identity Endpoints. The first ritual, a 60-day auto-disable. Query devices where last sync date time older than 60 days. Exclude by tag, break glass, loaner, lab, then disable. Post each act to log analytics with device ID, action, reason, actor. Ink your ledger. Create a workspace. Send telemetry via data collector API. Write the KQL. Cleanup rate, issues disabled, candidates, MTTR, issues time healthy, time non-compliant. GA minutes equals sum, elevation, duration. Alert when candidates spike, when MTTR climbs, when GA minutes exceed law. Expand with care. Onboarding, function on enrollment event, certificate check runbook at hour 1, remediation hook on compliance change. One bell, one nerve, then another. Intune declares, Azure enforces, Graph binds, managed identity limits, and the ledger proves this is self-healing, not ceremony. Want the runbook, KQL, and role scopes? Subscribe and watch the deep dive linked next. Bring one device, one function, one metric, then scale without adding keys.